Hi, this is Tim of the 1916 Company. Welcome and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email me. I am still Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com. It's still in the description below. It is your purchase and pricing email question line for buying this or any watch you see on any of our platforms. Email me for pricing. I am Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com. Today we are discussing a 2017 model year launch made in 18 pieces in white gold, as you see it here, with a blue PVD frosted dial. This is the MB&F Legacy Machine Split Escapement. There were several different variations on this frosted dial. The blue example made in 18 pieces, and I better explain the whole Legacy Machine concept before we get any deeper. MB&F is Max Buser and Friends, so he is the MC who brings all these people together. Some are his employees, some are outside collaborators, and previously, before the Legacy Machine launched, the watches were very forward-looking and futuristic. So the Legacy Machine line launched in 2011 to answer a hypothetical, which is, what if MB&F were around in the steampunk era, that is the 1880s, the 1890s, and making its horological machine wristwatches back then? Yes, that was the pocket watch era, but what if MB&F had been making wristwatches back then? The result, they believe, would be something like the Legacy Machine. Now, this is the Split Escapement, and it is a large watch. Large like a pocket watch with a movement to match. This wristwatch is 44 millimeters across, 17.8 millimeters thick, relatively compact, though, from lug to lug at 50.8 millimeters across, with a spacing of 22 millimeters between the lugs. Now, the original Legacy Machine was a collaboration with Kari Voutilainen, and while Kari was not part of this project, his basic aesthetic, especially on the movement side, endures. But the ergonomic concept here is general to the watch industry. The bigger you make a watch, the smaller you must make the lugs. So on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist, you can see this watch with its stubby, sharply angled lugs. It actually wears quite well. If your wrist is my size or larger, you can wear this no problem. And you can see that the lugs are tightly downward pointed, almost 90 degrees from the horizontal of the case band. You can also see that rather than being at the end of the case, the lugs have been slid a little bit towards the mid case so that they're further inboard. So again, 16 centimeter circumference wrists and up. The strap is large rectangular scale alligator leather. It's dark blue with a matte finish. There is some bolstering or stuffing to give it volume. It has a folded edge, a monotone stitch. On the bottom, you can see brand new MB&F factory strap. It has a rubber inlay on the bottom to separate the leather from the heat, sweat, oil, and grit of your wrist for longer lifespan of the strap. And you can see that to make the watch even more palatable for smaller wrists, the lugs have been drilled really close to the case to move that pivot inboard. And to avoid any impingement or reduction of range of motion, a curved spring bar is used here. Taking a quick look at the buckle, this is a well-known leaf spring double deployant that snaps shut and snaps open. It's made by G&F Chatelain. Now, the leaf spring itself is made of titanium. The remainder here, you can see this is a white gold titanium hybrid, and externally we have satin, we have polish, and we have media blast, and then we have MB&F's signature double battle axe logo right there. There's a lot of contrast on the case as well, a bit like a Longa watch. You can see that the lugs are stepped out from the case band. The case has a longitudinal satin finish, but the lugs have a vertical satin finish for subtle contrast. Lug hoods are polished, and you can see that we have a little polished outer lip to the case back, a short vertical lip to the bezel, and then the bezel, which is all polished. It's concave all the way around. We have a dramatically domed sapphire, more on that in a moment, an off-centered crown to make this an ambidextrous watch, and you can see the battle axe logo again right there. On the dial side, lots to love. This is a frosted dial, much like that you would have seen in the 19th century, but whereas acid would have been used for the etching back then, MB&F uses a process that's safer for the artisan and the environment, which is sideways or oblique application of pressure from a steel wire brush, which creates this modeled frosted profile without the use of an etching acid. And then PVD is used to give it its wonderful, vibrant, reflective color. All three of the subdials are beautiful white lacquer, and they have polished chapterings. We have a little pointer-style date with a jumper trigger. We have a power reserve indicator for the twin barrels in parallel, 72 hours of power reserve. We have our hours and minutes. It is a pleasure to set. The action is incredibly smooth and precise. And then at center, we have the pièce de résistance, or at least we have half of it, because this is the split escapement. So the actual anchor and escape wheel are on the reverse side of the watch. They're connected to the balance by a balance staff that is almost 12 millimeters tall, and then we have an enormous slow beating wheel, 14 millimeters in diameter. Now, while the beat rate and the overcoil are nostalgic and vintage, this is a very modern structure. As you can see, there's a fixed stud holder, and this is a free-sprung balance with its variable inertia blocks used to make all the timing changes. This is both very precise and very shock resistant, as there's no mobile stud index to move under shock. Plus, you can see that these bolts have been withdrawn from the free airstream to improve the aerodynamics of the balance and reduce the parasitic effects of drag on the balance architecture. So what this lacks in beat rate, it's 5 beats per second, by the way, it makes up in its sheer amount of inertia. And then you have that hand-bent overcoil, which allows the watch to keep consistent time in just about any physical position, because an overcoil's mass is more centered than a flat hairspring. A true pleasure to wind and set this watch. Now you can see this dramatically domed sapphire. The watch won't fit underneath most dress cuffs, not shirt sleeves, but it should fit under a lot of jacket cuffs simply because the ramp up of the thickness is so gradual. And it's necessary because this enormous black polished steel balance bridge, and it is a bridge, it's dual anchored. This has an incredible vaulted profile as it arcs over the dial, and you can see a very difficult finishing assignment for the artisan as it's mirrored and continuously rounded all the way across its surface. On the case back, we have a movement sized for the case, the mark of a true manufacturer. In the early days, MB&F would often source customer calipers from companies such as Sowind, for example, Girard-Perregaux, but this is their own fabrication. And while Stephen McDonnell was the independent watchmaking friend who worked on this particular version of the legacy machine, he kept most of the aesthetic tenets established by Kari Voutilainen on that original legacy machine, which is why the finish is world-class. We have beautifully broad and shaded stripes. We have incredibly broad, rounded, and mirrored hand-finished bevels. We have interior beveling on the wheels, a rare feature uncommonly found on even Geneva seal watches. This is really something. This is Grubel 4C level finish. We have solarization on the 2 ratchet wheels above the barrels, as well as the crown wheel core, satination on the tops of the wheels. You can see we have 1, 2, 3 sharp inward angles where bevels converge in a sharp crease, one of the toughest assignments for finishing artisans. We have gold chaton cups that hold the pivot jewels as they would have on a 19th century pocket watch. All screw heads are black polished with hand chamfered circumference and slots. Then we have 2 different sizes of engine turned perlage on the base plate. It's exhaustive but also exhausting to review all of this. And you can see that the steel click and click spring feature satination on their tops and bevels on their sides. And we also have places where bevels come to sharp points. That type of finishing is just as impressive as sharp inward angles. All this 30 meters water resistant, so dress watch only, don't go swimming with it. Now, because this is an enormous balance and it has an enormous near 12 millimeter long balance staff, it needs a lot of torque. So although we have 2 barrels here, they operate in parallel rather than the more common series. Series can be used to flatten out the torque curve and extend the power reserve of a watch, whereas if you want maximum torque, maximum force, you couple your barrels in parallel, which is exactly what we have here to move this enormous oscillating mass. And 3-day power reserve, beautiful finish that really deserves every superlative I could mention. A superb watch inside and out. The finish is Holy Trinity, but the attitude is MB&F. Reach out to Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details.